Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
Bullshit?
President Donald Trump is on the verge of a significant move when it comes to cannabis.
President Trump could sign an executive order Thursday that would reclassify it from a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3. That kind of reclassification could impact how marijuana is researched and used for medical purposes.
This is part of a massive overall change.
In the 1980s, if you were arrested for having 100 marijuana plants, you would receive the same penalty as someone found in possession of 100 grams of heroin. In 1996, California passed Proposition 215, allowing the legal sale of medicinal marijuana for patients with AIDS, cancer, and other diseases. Which brings us to today. 26 states and counting have legalized marijuana in some capacity.
Unfortunately, the entire debate about how to treat this drug has become suffused with bullshit. As medical use, decriminalization, and eventually legalization became more and more popular, and as businesses began to gain a foothold and eventually a tremendous amount of market clout, the public's basic understanding has gotten twisted by people with political and financial interests. So let's separate out some of the bullshit on these three key points. Is it safe? Is it addictive? And do we even know what we're talking about when it comes to cannabis? And let me say up front that there are pieces of the story that people advocating for the loosening of marijuana laws have long pointed out that are definitely not bullshit. One of them is that the highly restrictive laws around cannabis definitely come from historic accidents and even bias.
Those against the drug used pot's association to frighten mainstream America.
They changed the name to marijuana. They made it sound like a Spanish word.
The campaign against the so-called evil weed culminated in Congress passing the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, which essentially prohibited the sale and use of cannabis throughout America.
It's also true that some of the impetus behind medical marijuana laws 20 years ago came from genuine compassion and concern.
The prescription called Sativex is approved in Canada and the UK to relieve the symptoms of MS. We also, in the US, use Marinol, a liquid synthetic form of THC, to help with the side effects of chemo treatment in cancer patients.
But here's where the bullshit comes in. After a number of states agreed to allow cannabis for medicinal purposes, and after there was apparently little harm and potentially some good being done, by the mid-2010s, a combination of legalization advocates and business interests funded massive lobbying at the state level emphasizing potential economic benefits and some legitimate social justice arguments about the unfairness of incarcerating disproportionately Black and Latino offenders under drug laws for cannabis violations. They said, this is much safer, it's not addictive, and we know what we're dealing with here. So, let's look at all of those. First, is it safe?
I see patients who come to the ER with serious complications feeling like they're going to die. Reactionary cyclic vomiting, paranoia, anxiety, palpitations.
One particularly troubling condition is something that I've witnessed when I was hospitalized and the patient next to me in the ER could not stop throwing up.
Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome. Cannabis use that actually causes vomiting, unexplained abdominal pain, severe repeated nausea.
Rates of cannabinoid hyperemesis have risen so quickly that it's gone from a rarity 20 years ago to afflicting 6 million Americans today. Patients can vomit so much that they eventually lose teeth from all the stomach acid they throw up. But tooth-melting vomit is just the tip of the iceberg.
Severe psychotic breaks that require police involvement, physical restraints, spit masks, and antipsychotic medications.
That's right. Cannabis users develop psychosis at 5 times the rate of non-users. The National Institutes of Health estimates that 30% of schizophrenia cases among men aged 21 through 30 are caused by cannabis. To be sure, on many health effects, we simply don't know the answer. What about the second issue, the idea that cannabis isn't like all those other drugs that cause addiction or problem use? Unfortunately, bullshit. Dr. Wilson Compton, deputy director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, told the New York Times that almost everybody that uses cannabis daily is reporting problems with it. Almost everybody. 18 million Americans now show signs of a cannabis substance use disorder. And yes, this is a direct result of all the legal changes. Under 1 million Americans used cannabis daily 30 years ago, and today it's that 18 million figure. And among Americans who use some intoxicating substance daily, more now use cannabis than alcohol. So yes, it's absolutely a case of massive and rapidly growing problem use. And that brings us to the third issue, whether we really know what we're dealing with here, because we don't. Cannabis products today are anywhere from 4 to 24 times stronger in terms of the concentration of the psychoactive compound in it, THC, than the weed you might have scored 25 years ago. You can easily take a tiny edible that's way more powerful than a whole bowl you might have smoked a couple of decades ago. Look, if you're among the many Americans who like a little pot now and then, or you're among the advocates who say, well, we really need to do a lot more scientific research so we can understand how to deal with this substance, that's reasonable. But make no mistake, the president reclassifying the drug, or big businesses lobbying to remove what few restrictions still remain, isn't about letting people have a good time with a light drug. It's about politics, big money, and an incredibly powerful new form of this substance that we really don't understand. If there's good news, it's that I didn't even tell you the twisted story of how the federal government mistakenly legalized synthetic cannabis nationwide and then quietly fixed it in November 2025 by closing the loophole. And people from both parties agreed. So elected leaders do understand that they've got a problem, and they've shown that they can put some of the genie back in the bottle. Bong? And that also goes to show that anyone who's still using the same arguments from 20 years ago, or who's conveniently ignoring all of these facts, is high on their own supply.